6 rounds are now done with the championship. It's pretty close to a third. So with that, I kind of wanted to go through different statistics and stuff to see if there's any patterns or similarities to previous championships that would kind of help us see who might actually win this. I know that right now Roczen is the red plate holder, and that would mean that he's in the best position possible to win the championship, but that's not always the case. And I just wanted to see if the rider that's in his position in first place statistically at this point in the championship wins from different statistics. That probably made absolutely no sense. So I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. I went through this championship, previous championships, to see what all the different statistics were. So I did obviously like average position at this point. The first rider to win 3 races, because that's what Ken just did. Lap times, passes, that kind of stuff. Okay, so first off is just the average finish of all the dudes. Obviously, Roczen is first. He has an average finish of second place. Webb is in second with an average finish of 3.8. Tomac is in third with an average finish of 5.1, and so on and so on. So right now, Roczen is much more consistent than the rest of the guys with an average finish of second place. That is 1.8 positions higher than Webb in second. And I do have some historical data to see where this kind of stacks up with previous championships. So I went through this. This chart might look familiar because I made this a few videos ago talking about Roczen's been in this position 4 different times, leading after 6 rounds. I have updated it since then to now 6 rounds to see how this all stacks up. And as you can see, from 2003 to 2020, I don't have before 2003 because for some reason AMA doesn't have that on their website, and I'm not going to go through each individual round for each rider. That would take way too long. This already took a few days to compile everything that I did. So I'm not going to do that. So we have 2003 to 2020. And after 6 rounds, the rider that is leading after 6 rounds, 14 times out of, 18 times, they won the championship. So actually, what is that? I'm curious. So that's 78% of the time the leader after 6 rounds does win the championship. That's pretty decent odds for Ken right now. But what I think is actually pretty interesting is that these riders in red right here, their average finish after 6 rounds is always above second place. Now, a lot of the greens, there is some that are over second place that still ended up winning, but on average, their finish is under second place. And I think this is pretty dang interesting because right now, Roczen is dead on second place. Like 2017, Dungey was 2.3. 2015, Dungey was 2.5. Phil Poto in 14 was 3.5. Dungey in 2010 was 3.0. Anderson in 2018 was second place on the dot. So there's obviously a lot of instances where riders have a higher than second place finish after 6 rounds. They still won the championship. So this is some cool statistics, but it doesn't really help us with knowing if Roczen is really better than everybody else right now and if he's able to win the championship. It doesn't help us in that sense. It's cool stats, but it doesn't do much. So after that, what did I do? Yep, okay. So I went through and this particular stat, whatever you want to call it, I was working on before this latest round. I was working on it right before round 6. So I actually had first to win 2 wins the championship. But now that Roczen has won 3 and he's the first to win 3, I went back and I also did 3. So I do have all the data from 74 to 2020, but I also have data separate from 2003 to 2020 because pretty much the entire 1980s to early 90s before McGrath came in, it was insanely competitive. So it kind of skewed the statistics towards a lower chance, if that makes sense. So from 74 to 20, I have the first to win 2 wins the championship. That's only 57% of the time, not very high. But if you take out everything before 2003, that number actually jumps up to 77%. That seems like a pretty high percentage to me. And then obviously the first to win 3 times has a higher percent chance of winning. I mean, that would make sense at 68% before 2003. And then if you take out those after 2003, that number jumps all the way up to 83%. So Roczen being the first to win 3 times this year, it seems like pretty good chances to win the championship. 83% if you take from 2003 to 2020. But again, I mean, it's a championship. Anything could happen. This is not conclusive evidence that Roczen or anybody else is going to win the championship because history repeats itself. It's just kind of fun stuff to look at. So that's what I have for the first rider to win 2 times and the first rider to win 3 times if they actually win the championship or not. Okay, what else do we got here? So we also have passes. I feel like that might be something that kind of contributes a lot. If a rider is able to pass a lot of people, then they are going to have a higher chance of being up front, even if they have a bad start. So I wanted to see if passes had any kind of indication that a rider would have a higher chance of winning the championship or not. So I have 2021 so far after 6 rounds. Webb has actually passed the most people with 22 passes total. Roczen is in second with 14 passes. And looking back at previous championships, what I did was I took the top 5 riders at the end of the championship. I found their average first lap, average finishes throughout the year. AMA, it's real nice. They have that on the results page for 2017 through 2020. They didn't have it for 16, so I just went rounds 1 through 6 by myself. That sucked, so I'm not going to do anything earlier than 2016. But if you're confused about this chart at all, whatever is in parentheses for 2017 through 2020, that is the first 6 rounds. What's not in parentheses is all of the rounds together. It's not a perfect system doing average first lap to average finish and then just multiplying that by 17 to find the total passes, because as you can see in 2018, after 6 rounds, it says that Tomac's been passed 53 times. So in 2018, he had 2 DNFs and 1 DNS. He didn't even show up for the second round, so that would have him technically with this system being passed by 22 riders when he didn't even line up. So that 53 number, you could probably take off 22 to make it 31. But yeah, he didn't have a good opening season. That's why he has 53. What you can see is that the rider that ends up winning the championship after 6 rounds, most of the time they're in the top 2. So like Tomac, after 6 rounds, had passed the most people out of everybody. He ended up winning the championship. Webb in 2019 was in second, but he ended up winning the championship. 18, Anderson passed the most riders after 6 rounds, ended up winning the championship. 2017, Dungey passed the second most riders, ended up winning the championship. But in 2016, Dungey was actually... I'd scratch that. I did not put those in order. Oh, that's what's going on. Yeah, that's not right. Hold up. I gotta change this. Wow, I jacked this up. Okay, the 2016 section should be fixed now. Okay, Dungey was in third for most amount of passes, but he ended up winning the championship. And that's mostly because his average first lap was pretty much around third place. So he couldn't pass very many riders. So obviously, if you get a good start, that's going to help a lot. But I was curious. Maybe I'll do this chart again, and I'll do it off of that average first lap. See if that shows anything. From what I can tell, it's pretty much if you're in the top 3 for amount of passes made out of everybody that is in the top 5 so far, you'll probably have a good chance of winning the championship. Roczen, Webb, and Tomac are the top 3. Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue that they're the top 3 probably right now. So that doesn't make much. That doesn't do much either. Okay, Now this one I thought was super interesting. This one was probably my favorite. This one took the longest to figure out. And that was just speed. If the rider had the most speed, that they would win the championship. So, God, this took forever. I went rounds 1 through 6 from 2015 to 2020 and this year, 2021, obviously. I took the average lap time from each race for the top three to top 5 riders. I'll get to that in a second. Averaged all of those averages, and then I also took their fastest lap time from each race. Averaged those, put them in order to see if the fastest rider of that year was the one who actually won the championship. So these charts might be a little confusing. If somebody has an asterisk next to their name, it means that they did not finish top 3 at the end of the year, but they were in top 3 after 6 rounds. And then in 2018, Muskin and Tomac, they don't have any data because they had both at least missed 1 round where they didn't get any lap times. So you can't do an average compared to everybody else when they have 1 round different. What I found was pretty interesting, and that is most of the time the fastest rider wins the championship, at least when it comes to the average fastest lap time. There was pretty much, who do we have? For average lap times, 2015, Dungey had the fastest average, won the championship. 2016, he had the fastest average, won the championship. 2017, he had the fastest average and won the championship. 2018, Anderson had the fastest average and won the championship. 2019, Roczen had the fastest average, didn't end up winning the championship. 2020, Tomac had the fastest lap time after 6 rounds, was actually in second place. He won the championship. So out of that group, Roczen was the only one in 2019 that had the fastest lap time after 6 rounds and did not win the championship. And so far, Roczen has the fastest average lap time by quite a bit. They're in the past 5-6 years, the only person that's had this big of a gap between them and second place when it comes to average lap times is actually Anderson in 2018. So the next fastest dude was Barcia, and he was over a half a second faster on average than Justin was. And right now, Ken is almost half a second faster than Webb on average, and Tomac. And if you go to fastest, it gets a little bit different. Because in 2015, Tomac was on average the fastest rider in the first 6 rounds, but he ended up getting second in the championship. He was actually third fastest also in average, which is pretty interesting. He couldn't put a full race together with fast laps. It seemed like he could only put 1 fast lap down per race. Tomac has steadily been getting better at that, and that's why he was able to win the championship last year, maybe. Guys like Dungey, that you never thought was the fastest guy. He was just the most consistent guy. Turned out a lot of times he was the fastest guy. 2015, not so much. He actually was the third fastest after 3 rounds. But in 16 and 17, he was the fastest guy on average. And even Anderson, a lot of people didn't think that maybe he was the fastest guy, but in the first 6 rounds as well, on average, he was the fastest guy. Roczen in 2019 and Tomac in 2020. Fastest lap time is a little bit different than average. A lot of the times the fastest guy doesn't end up winning the championship, but actually more than not, the fastest guy does end up winning the championship. At the top here, and I actually put like estimated year-end result. When it comes to the average lap time, the number 1 guy after 6 rounds on average got 1.5 as his finish, and just for fastest lap times, they got 1.7. It is much more consistent for the fastest guy to do good than somebody else to win the championship, because if you look, second fastest guy and the third, after 6 rounds, they don't do so hot on average at the end of the year with a 5.3, 5.7, 4.3, 5.7 average finishes for each. This video was probably very, very confusing because I'm confusing myself, but I wanted to kind of just dive into the statistics of each race so far, previous races, previous years, to see if there's any kind of pattern into who actually wins the championship. Is it the rider that wins the most? Is it the rider that is the fastest? Is it the rider that passes the most? From what I can tell, it's actually a combination of pretty much everything. Maybe there's some kind of algorithm you can make that takes all of this data and mixes it up and poops out of answer. I don't know. I'm not going to try to make one, that's for sure. I thought this was interesting, though. With all of these different points, lap time, passes, wins, average finish, all this stuff, though, it does seem like Roczen is in a very good position because he is, well, almost the top in all those. Webb is the top when it comes to the passes, but for everything else, Roczen is the top guy, and that puts him in a very, very good position after 6 rounds for the end of this championship. Let me know if this is something that you want me to keep updated. If you don't care, then I won't, but I thought it was pretty interesting. So, yeah. Yeah. Kind of skewed the statistics. Oh my God, the statistics.